This is Henry.
No, literally, like it's a physical block.
Okay, so I have this crazy idea that I want to make a physical art block, to represent like an artist art block. Now I have this wooden crate right here, and I'm just going to take a little piece off. It's got a two-tone gradient that I think is going to work out really well for this project. So we can go ahead and move this out of the way. And there's that two-tone gradient I was mentioning. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut these down to size. And so that I can get a really nice square look, if I take off just a chunk and use that to measure it, I should be able to get roughly a perfect square. Now, could I easily just use a tape measure and measure out everything? Yes, 100%. Am I willing to go grab it from the other room? No, I'm not. So now that I have the first one marked out, I'm going to go ahead and try to measure it on this right here. And once I find one that's very similar, I'm going to go ahead and cut it down to size. And this will work out as like a stop. So here forward, every cut is going to be the exact same. Now I'm thinking if I cut around 6 of these, that should give me a rough square shape. It doesn't necessarily have to be a perfect cube, but unless you measure it with an actual tape measure, I want it to at least appear like a cube. At least from like the human eye's perspective.
No, I swear I'll put it back when I'm done with it.
Now this might seem unorthodox, but I don't want it to have a perfect finish. I want to keep that rough look. And I think if I use like a paver to sand down all the pieces, I'll still get a really nice, smooth finish, but not necessarily a perfect finish. The vision I see is like the block is almost complete, but not necessarily quite finished. Because I think if I spend the time to actually sand it down, the idea isn't quite there anymore. So now that I knocked down all the sharp edges, let's go ahead and start with a new slate. And I have roughly around 6 of these little squares. And I'm thinking of alternating that pattern from that dark spot to the light spot and kind of checkering it down all the way. And I have an idea. I think if I use a little bit of super glue, it should be able to hold on to it just enough for me to keep working on it while the wood glue dries. Because the wood glue is going to take multiple hours to dry. But I don't want to wait those hours while everything sets. So right here, I'm just going to add a bead of super glue on each corner, and I'm going to try to just hold it just for a few seconds just so it can grab onto each other. I'm going to go ahead and repeat that for the other 4 pieces. And the type of super glue I'm using is a super glue gel. It's specifically called Gorilla Super Glue Gel. And then after I finish this last one right here, I'm going to go ahead and actually place the paver on top of it to try to help squeeze out any of that excess glue. And I'm going to roughly have it sit there for about 5 minutes before I continue. And so now that my 5 minutes are up, let's go ahead and continue gluing the rest of them. And it's going to be the exact same process, just a little bit of wood glue in the center and a bead of super glue on each corner. And then once I get all that done, I'm going to go ahead and place the stone on top of it one more time. And I'm just going to go ahead and let that dry while I work on the next step. For this next part right here, I feel like every artist kind of has one of these.
I'm gonna need to borrow your hands.
And the hands on this little mannequin kind of look like perfect little feet that I can go ahead and add on to the wooden art block.
Actually, I'm gonna need your arms too, buddy.
So I'm thinking the arms can be used as like hands. And unlike the hands, I can actually just take off the screws for these, so they come off pretty easy. And always make sure to keep the screws, you never know when you'll need those.
Actually, I think I can cut this one in half.
So I think if I cut this in half, it'll make it a lot easier to glue.
Huh, would you look at that? I guess I didn't need both arms.
And similar to the wooden slices, I really just need to knock down all the sharp edges. Everything kind of works out already as is. I don't need the edges to be perfectly flat, but I do need at least a flat enough surface to be able to grab onto it. And I'm still debating if I'm going to use the wood glue super glue method or if I'm going to use like an epoxy to try to glue it together. So I just have an absurd amount of tools laying around, and I'm going to be using this engraver right here. I already have a face marked out and the word art block on the side. And then I have the hands and feet right here. I also have wood stain here, and I'm thinking I want to try out a little bit of wood stain on this just to see what type of color I get out of it. I'm hoping to get like this velvety brown color. But before moving on to like an acrylic, I want to just see how this is going to look, because I might be able to keep that wooden grain look. So I'm just going to add a little bit to this red Solo cup here. And because it's never a good idea to leave an open paint container, let's go ahead and move this off to the side for now. Let's go ahead and start coloring all the hands and feet.
Yep, I hate that.
I ended up not liking the look, but I am going to have to wait for that wood stain to dry a little bit before adding any type of acrylic. So the engraver tool I'm going to be using is called Plaid, and I've had it for a while and it's been basically sitting here brand new. So I'm not entirely sure how to use it, but it seems pretty straightforward. Let's go ahead and toss in the batteries.
Yeah, this looks right.
And I run into my first problem right here. It won't turn on. Now there's a couple of things that could be wrong. It could be that I put in the batteries wrong. Maybe it's just a faulty piece of equipment. So I'm going to go ahead and try to mess with it a little bit more before giving up on this method.
Maybe there's something on the instructions. Let's go ahead and take a read.
The instructions said nothing. It had no helpful ideas. So I'm on my own for this one. So my initial thought here is maybe I just didn't tighten it down enough and the batteries weren't catching. Obviously that didn't do anything.
Dude, no, I can't be this
I tried messing with that dial on the bottom. Maybe that's an on and off switch. Tried flipping the batteries the other way to see what would happen.
Look, it says it right here.
And of course I missed the obvious. It's right on the actual product. So once I put in the batteries correctly, it turned on perfectly fine. Still don't know what that dial does on the bottom though. Maybe it's like a speed setting, but I'm not really concerned about that. Let's go ahead and put that box to the side and let's go ahead and start on this. Now the idea is pretty straightforward. I'm going to kind of drill in some holes for the eyes, and then I'm going to try to concave that mouth a little bit, trying to keep that center a little bit more raised. And this will do two things. One, it's going to make it really easy to paint because you can't really mess it up at that point. And two, it'll help catch different shadows. Now it came with like this little sanding bit, and with that I can actually smooth out all these lines. It also came with a set of other bits, but I'm finding that only the round one and the little sanding bit are the only ones that work for me. The other ones seem a little bit more difficult to use, and I'm sure they have their own practical uses. But for my purposes, the round bit and then the little sanding bit's the best one for me. Now for the side where the words are going to be written, I don't need too much, but I do want it to knock it down just a little bit just to catch those shadows. But it's not the main focus, so I don't need to have it perfect on this side. Right here, I'm going to come back with that sanding bit and try to smooth out everything so it's not so sharp. And I get this is probably more of a polishing tool right here, but I find it worked really well to get all the wood dust out of all those crevices. Now to get that velvety brown color that I want, I'm going to go ahead and mix a few colors. I'm going to be mixing a brown, a black, a little bit of a red, and a little bit of orange. And this will give almost like a chocolate type color, and it'll have a really smooth look to it. So now that I have that color mixed up, I'm going to go ahead and try to paint all the hands and feet, and I ended up doing a total of 2 coats. And already this is looking so much better than that wood stain. I do lose that wood grain look, but I do get the color that I was really hoping to get. Right here, just painting the bottom of the feet. And the paint did end up ripping a little bit, which is okay, because I'll come back around and paint it again once it's attached. And put that off to the side so it can dry a little bit. In the meantime, let's go ahead and paint the eyes and the mouth. And because we Dremeled it out, it'll be extremely easy to paint. I essentially have all my guidelines right there. Let's go ahead and paint the inside of the words right here. I'm going to use that same brown color. And while that dries, let's go ahead and add a second layer to the front, just so that we can have the same consistent color with those hands and feet. Same with the words right here, just adding a second layer and touching up anything that I might have missed. Now here's one of the benefits of drilling out those eyes. I had a little bit of paint spill over, but because it's outside those guidelines, just using the sanding bit I can easily get rid of it and get those really crispy lines to it. Now for my art block, I'm going to have like a dribble of spit coming out of his mouth, almost like he's drooling a little bit. And I'm going to go with a more cartoony blue look. And very similarly, since it's already Dremeled out, it's going to be really easy to paint. And then right here, I'm just going to add a little bit of white, just to add some highlights. And then a darker blue inside, just to give it some more depth to it. After that, I'm going to outline the words art block with some white outlines. And this will just kind of give it more of a cartoony look. Now using the sanding bit, I can get rid of any of the excess paint that I might have gone overboard with. I don't think the wood glue and super glue method is going to work out in this case, since I don't have enough surface area to work with. So I'm going to use an epoxy for this part right here, because all I need is just a little dot of that, and that'll hold extremely well. Now the dry time for this epoxy is only around 5 minutes, so I don't have to wait all that long for everything to fully attach. Gonna do a couple minor touch-ups, and then to lock everything in place, just gonna use a clear lacquer. I don't know about you, but I actually really like how this looks. It looks silly, it looks unfinished, but I like it. Total time to make this project, roughly around 3.5 hours, so you can easily knock it out in a single day. If you do end up making one, I'd love to see what it looks like.
I can't believe I spent the day doing this.